Before we call to order a meeting, we'd like to pause and observe a moment of silence in honor and remembrance of Claudia Monaco, beloved New Canaan Public Schools teacher, community member, friend, mother, and more. Thank you. So I'd like to call to order the December 20th meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. First up, we have 3 minutes to approve. First is December 6th, motion to approve. Phil, second. Brendan, all in favor? Okay, next up is December 8th meeting, motion to approve. Julie, second. Erica, all in favor? Unanimous. And finally, the December 13th workshop, motion to approve. Penny, second. Hugo, all in favor? Okay, moving on. Tonight, I'd like to propose a few amendments to the agenda. First is to add an action item, which is the first read of the budget goals, budget assumptions, and related priorities. This is a first read, recognizing we'll need a little more time to review and discuss, so we'll set aside plenty of time on the second read to discuss and review. So that's the first one. The second amendment is to add an executive session for discussion of a real estate transaction, and finally, an action item that will follow that executive session. So motion to make the amendments. Brendan, second. Phil, all in favor? Unanimous. And then motion to approve the amended agenda. Julie, second. Brendan, all in favor? Great, thank you.
Very efficient.
Comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. Is there anyone wishing to address the board this evening? Please state your name.
Hi, James Bash. So I wanted to speak briefly about the new later start scenario and a couple of other matters. I'm in favor of this latest scenario. It strikes me as a reasonable ground by being beneficial to 7th to 12th graders while not being detrimental to elementary school kids and dual working parents. This latest scenario is partly attributed to the result of a high school survey started by students asking peers about their previous start time scenario. 60% of high school students responded. Of those that responded, 76% they did not want the change. 76%. Roughly the same percentage of students that said no when asked, do you want additional homework? That was a joke. Tough crowd. All right. So additional negative feedback from staff and parents regarding the impact on after-school activities also contributed to the new scenario. I'm encouraged that the administration is highlighting these considerations, though they could and should have been known before. It reflects that in this matter, what we expect of older students, rigorous examination of all available data to support an optimal and common sense conclusion, did not fully occur. I'm very hopeful with the new voices on this board. The BOE becomes a critical friend, helping an experienced and well-intentioned administration improve through asking challenging questions and digging deeper. This will be especially important given potentially contentious issues coming up, whether it be concerning a budget that grew at over a 4% annual per student rate between 2001 and 2019, the last reported data from the Connecticut Department of Education, asking parents about their kids' vaccination status, and the impact of block scheduling on high school students' attentiveness, mood, and performance. Thanks. Have good holidays.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Jennifer DeLippe, 70 White Oakshade Lane, here in New Canaan. I'm going to try to do this. It's either mask or glasses, so bear with me. I'm the mother of Jack, 7th grade at Saxon, Margot, 4th grade at South. I'm no stranger to many of you on the subject of start times. I've always said that I get both sides of this coin, and if the coin could have more sides, I get that too, as Margot, my youngest, was and still is my child whose clock was wound later. And Jack, now that he's 12, must be woken up. I get it. I always got it. Sleep is critical at every age. We as a group have shared significant research around elementary students and how critical sleep is to them. It's time to acknowledge that body of work. And I draw your attention to this specialist from Auburn University who has and continues to offer to speak directly to this board. Since you've heard me speak and write at length about this, I offer you a slightly different point of view. Prior to COVID, sleep for our older students was known to be the largest health crisis confronting them. As we look wider at all the data, we see sleep in general across all age groups, including adults, is in poor shape. With COVID, we learned that as a community, no one group stands alone. The solution stands across the community. How we solve for all age groups. It means that there may not be a perfect scenario that fits all, but certainly solutions that fit the many, serve for the greater good. The scenario discussed on December 8th does just that. Coming from a very different point of view, I offer this. We're supposed to eat 5 fruits and vegetables a day. When Jack was born, I would count, measure, and worry when the day didn't go as planned. Would I be thwarting the science behind good eating? I have a degree in business and culinary arts, so I figured, easy, of course I can make things delicious and follow the data. Our pediatricians in New York and New Canaan concurred, it isn't what you eat in a day, it's what you eat in a week. A nutritionist, a speaker from New Canaan Cares, even reminded us on a call last year that if you happen to eat watermelon and only watermelon for dinner, it's probably okay now and then. Maybe the next night watermelon won't be so appealing. The point is, every day is different and every child is different, but what we can provide in a week is great. The opportunity for all of our children in any given week to get sleep is great. The new plan offers the same opportunities across all our children to thrive, our community to navigate continued uncertainties with few distractions, and our families to spend the time they need. Our students to get the sleep, access to after-school activities, and work they need to prosper. Don't let art stand in the way of letting all the science work for all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Raderman Tamayo. It's actually my first time speaking at one of these, so I hope it changes things up. You know, my colleagues have done such a great job. So I wanted to share how excited my family, our friends and neighbors are about the revised plan. I'm the mom of twin preschoolers, so we're actually not even in the district yet, but my kids will go to West next year. And thank you, Dr. Lutzy, Dr. Krenti, Mr. Walder, and the administration for continuing the search for a new plan. And it seems, in my opinion, like something has been found. And Dr. Lutzy, I wanted to thank you for the informative podcast. I'm hoping everybody listened to it, but if not, I hope all of those points are reiterated tonight. Bringing elementary schools to 8:30 relieves an enormous amount of concern about our youngest learners getting enough sleep and quality time in the evening with family as compared to an 7:45 or 8 a.m. start. It accomplishes putting all the elementary schools on the same schedule as the board has voiced as a priority, while also minimizing disruption in schedule changes for elementary schools. It is an optimal time to start learning for elementary students, and it will alleviate some after-school childcare costs associated with the change, especially because we will not lose the large population of high school babysitters. I think it's also safe to say that we have a real shortage of childcare in this town, and I do recognize that it will impact everyone differently. I also hope that we can get the in-school, after-school program confirmed for next year. The 5th and 6th grade spending only 2 years in the later schedule, starting at 9:15, seems incredibly reasonable. Starting high school at 8 a.m. combined with the new block schedule will ensure that high schoolers will get more sleep. 90% of high schoolers will be able to start later at least 1 day per week, according to Dr. Lutzy's podcast, and a good deal of students may get 2 of these sleep-ins. While no scenario will be perfect for all, as we've heard many times before, it does give high school students more sleep versus the status quo. The new plan also addresses and responds to the feedback from the high school students who have been against an 8:30 start, which they feel is too late to balance after-school commitments. This new plan will not interfere as much with after-school activities, babysitting, and sports. Most importantly, this schedule would also minimize disruption for our teachers and staff, our most valuable assets, with respect to childcare, traffic, commuting, and personal scheduling. Thank you again for listening to the feedback of and your service to the New Canaan community. I'm feeling more hopeful than ever that we'll be able to get this right the first time. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you. First action item this evening is the model United Nations Club field trip with Mr. Phillips from the high school. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, so go ahead. We'll make a motion to approve the field trip request for the Model United Nations Club. Brendan, second. Phil, thank you.
So, as Paul sets up, just very briefly to introduce, we generally, in the past, would have an annual presentation by Paul and a couple of members of the club who would talk to us about all of the upcoming trips that they had planned for the year and all the exciting things that were going to happen and give us a recap on what had happened the year before. But as you know, the disruption of the pandemic means that they hadn't been traveling, and any trips they were doing were sort of maybe a day here or there under close supervision, other things. So it's exciting to welcome Paul back to the Board of Ed to talk about an upcoming trip proposal. In the future, we'll be looking to get back on that schedule at some point where the students can come, give us an update, share some of their experiences, and really talk about the club and how wonderful the experiences are for all the students that are involved in the group, which has expanded every year, certainly in the past. I'm not sure if last year expanded as well, but to include the middle school and others. And Paul will give us an update on all that. So Paul's also a social studies teacher here at the high school, for anyone who doesn't know him, and has been shepherding this club probably since its inception, if not close to it.
Well,
I
yeah,
think.
since 2007.
There you go.
It's been a while.
Excellent. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Okay, I have a quick sort of overview presentation of the club for those of you who haven't seen what the club is about before, and then we'll sort of talk about the specifics of the trip that we're asking permission for. So, just quickly what the Model United Nations Club aims to do. We position it within the school community as an academic sport, and these are the focal areas for the club. First, promoting a non-US centric worldview for students. And the age range is really from middle school, so from 5th grade through to 12th grade. So it's a broad base. Secondly, developing skills in research, critical thinking, persuasion and collaboration. The conferences we go to, whether they're local or interstate and on occasion international, give kids the chance to see the very best and the brightest competition out there, and we perform well in that environment. We give back to the community on a local level, particularly by supporting financially disadvantaged students. In fact, over the last 5 years, it's probably about $1,000 a year that's put towards financially disadvantaged students so they can attend conferences. And then finally, preparing students, members for leadership at college and beyond. In fact, the conference that I wanted to talk about tonight, the Secretary General, that's the highest college student, is a New Canaan alumni, Kate Reeves. So we're looking forward to seeing her. The last time I was here, we were talking about the 2019 season. In fact, the last overnight or interstate conference we went to was the Georgetown conference in February 2020. At that time, we had about 87 active members. We went to 5 college conferences. We went to an international conference in The Hague at the end of every January. And we had sort of a broad range across all grade levels. At conferences, awards are given, and that year we won 29 awards from all grade levels, including 8 Best Delegate Awards. And one that made us very proud was winning the Research Award at Dartmouth for the third year in a row, in fact. We go to college conferences. The last time we went to 5 conferences in the 2019 season, we went to William and Mary, Brown, Georgetown, Cornell, and Dartmouth. And that's been the sort of the program for probably 10 years. Obviously last year we didn't, and we're hoping this year. We went online to Brown in November, and we're hoping to do Georgetown in February in person, and perhaps Dartmouth in person in April. As I mentioned, for 8 years we've attended Thyman. We're the only public high school in the United States that's invited to it. There are a couple of private schools that attend Thyman, I think 3 from the United States, but the majority of schools that attend that conference in The Hague are from outside the United States. So for our students, it really gives them an opportunity to meet kids from all around the world and share views. One thing that happens at the high school, and we've been doing this now for, I think last year was our 11th or 12th year, is the sophomore simulation. It's a It's a time when sophomores of all, regardless of their academic standing, participate in committees throughout the high school, and these committees are run by members of the Model UN Club, and it's a one-day event in May, so we're hoping to do it again May next year. Scrimmages. These are local events that we partner up, particularly recently we've been partnering up with Greenwich High School. We've done 2 this fall. We'll be doing another one with them in the spring. And SACS also has a scrimmage. And the idea behind that is it gives the kids a chance to meet students from other schools, so it ups the level of competition, but it's in a pretty sort of manageable environment as well. We had one a couple of weeks ago. We hosted it at SACS because we couldn't get into the building here, and we had 80 students from around Fairfield County attend that. It was very successful. SACS has its own program. They meet every Wednesday, I believe. And for them, their yearly sort of big event is going to the United Nations building and attending a one-day event there. So as far as our priorities for this year, it's to get back in person to conferences. We've done some online conferences so far. We've had some in-person local events, such as the scrimmages. Rebuild. Our numbers did drop off because we were going to we weren't going to in-person conferences. And so the plan there is we've already done Brown virtually, is to do Georgetown in February and Dartmouth in April. We'll continue with the scrimmages, we'll continue with the sophomore simulation. We have a fundraising effort that I can explain. And finally, we won't be asking to participate in The Hague this year until the COVID situation is resolved. Okay, so as far as fundraising is concerned, we need fundraising because the travel is obviously expensive. We do well with donations. We have a pie sale in spring. We have a fall fundraiser, which some of you in the local community may have seen this booster card that gives people discounts at outlets throughout New Canaan. Okay, so as far as Georgetown is concerned, and I shared a field trip request. I'm not sure if you have that in your packets.
Yep, you do.
Okay, so essentially the conference we're looking at is from February 17 to 20 next year, so about 2 months away. 3,000 delegates from around the United States attend this every year. It's the largest student-run conference in the United States, and it's really seen as the nationals. It's the most prestigious conference in the United States. I've already mentioned the way we view Model United Nations at the high school as an academic sport. And as far as the specific logistics are concerned, we're planning on staying at a hotel, the Courtyard Marriott down in Washington at DuPont Circle, and 4 students per room. So that means at this conference we're planning on taking 16. Normally, in a normal year, we would take 24. We want to start with a smaller group, a more manageable group. All students who attend that conference need to be vaccinated. And in fact, all the events that we've had so far, all of the students have been vaccinated that have attended events. The 2 people going would be Alison Freeman, who's also the advisor at SACS, and myself. And we've been doing this since 2007, 2008. As far as the costs are concerned, they're on the second page. And you'll see there how important it is for us to do our fundraising efforts. The sources of funding at the moment for the club come from a number of areas. We're a line item with the PFA, which helps us with some of our costs. There is transport support we get from the district. And then these fundraisers that we conduct every year raise between $5,000 and $10,000 for the club as well. Based on that, we ask students or families to pay, and up till now it's been $250 a trip, which is clearly less than the cost of the trip, and that's why we rely particularly on our fundraising activities. As I mentioned also, if any student is in financial need, the costs of the trip, that $250 to $350 is covered by the club. Furthermore, when it comes to COVID, The policy that Georgetown have in place is very comprehensive. Bottom line is they're relying on the Washington DC Board of Health. That's their starting point. And then they have specific facilities available as well. All students have to be vaccinated to attend unless they have a religious or a medical reason. They have testing on site at the conference, and that's available free of charge every day. Questions?
Questions? Thank you for that. Questions or comments? I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and I have really enjoyed listening to the kids come and report out in the past. It's just they have passion, and it's just a very rich experience for the students who get to participate. So thank you for your leadership on this.
You're welcome. Okay.
Okay. All right. With that, we'll take a vote. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, next up is a donation from the East School PTC.
You have
Separate, okay. It's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Chris Wallach, principal at East School. It is a pleasure to be here this evening. Before I do share about the East PTC Outdoor Learning Center project, I did just want to take a moment to thank the board for recognizing Mrs. Monaco this evening. Claudia was an extraordinary teacher and colleague to all of us at East, so just thank you for recognizing that. Now, as I turn to tonight's agenda item regarding the East Outdoor Learning Center, what we're referring to as the OLC, last year we began using our outdoor courtyard that we have at East School for mask breaks and for some learning experiences in the context of the pandemic. And what students, staff, and our PTC soon realized is there was so much potential in that space, potential for broader learning, for collaboration, and for truly innovative experiences. We began taking some inspiration from West School and the Outdoor Learning Center that they had developed and began brainstorming for ourselves the possibilities in our courtyard. And we began thinking about and imagining what an outdoor classroom space might look like with outdoor seating and an outdoor whiteboard, a theater stage area that could be used for musical performances, could be used for author theaters, could be used for students to present their writing. We began envisioning sensory spaces for students, a traversing wall for gross motor work in that space, and the ideas just kept coming. So we met with our PTC, we met with building officials in town, we met with Dan Clark, our facilities director, Diane Starr, who's a landscape designer, who also worked on the West project as well, and suddenly the ideas were coming to life. And then this fall, our East Eagles Nest fundraising initiative was focused on our Outdoor Learning Center and supporting that project. And thanks to the generosity of our East School families and the community there at East, we have a donation that will be presented this evening that will support phase 1 of this project. So I am very pleased to turn this over now to our PTC co-presidents, Mrs. Lydia Kramer and Mrs. Emily Cerrone, who are going to share with you more details about the project, what we envision, the phases of that project, and the funding for it. So we are very appreciative of the PTC's commitment to this project and very eager and excited to get started.
Hi, thank you for letting us be here to share our exciting plans with you guys. This is actually something that our predecessors, the past several PTC boards, have been dreaming about, but nothing like what we've lived through for the past 2 years to really create that sense of urgency. We're so fortunate to have learned from our counterparts at West School as they've just completed their Outdoor Learning Center. In fact, as Chris had mentioned, we've employed the same project manager, and she's really simplified the process for us. We'd really like to thank the community at East for the incredible efforts to raise funds so that we can present this plan before you. But before we actually get into the plan, we wanted you to hear firsthand what East students and East staff had to say about the Outdoor Learning Center. Hopefully it plays.
This is East School. It's pretty great. Actually, it's really great. Did you know that almost every year we're ranked as one of the top 5 elementary schools in Connecticut? You don't have to take...
You have to see the visual.
math at East to know it's really good. It's not a surprise. We have great teachers. This is East School. It's pretty great. Actually, it's really great. Did you know that almost every year we're ranked as one of the top 5 elementary schools in Connecticut? You don't have to take math at East to know it's really good. It's not a surprise. We have great teachers, great parents, and of course, great students. These teachers are always thinking about how to improve our learning.
Improving on something that's already great can be really, really hard.
But that doesn't stop us from thinking big. This is our courtyard. 2 trees, some shrubs, grass, and a path. Before COVID, it was just something nice to look at. But then teachers and students began to use the space, and that got us all wondering, how can we turn this courtyard into a dynamic outdoor learning space? And of course, our teachers have some great ideas.
As principal of East School, I am so excited that learning will literally be able to move outside of the classroom walls here into an outdoor learning center. It's going to be fantastic. Just think what our students and our staff will be able to bring here. Their imagination, their innovation, their creativity. I can't wait.
I'm so excited about using the Outdoor Learning Center for library classes. When I saw that the plans included a stage and bench seating, I thought it would be perfect for kids to do readers theater, where they practice their reading fluency as they perform for classmates.
We're going to have some wonderful stations here in the Outdoor Center. We're going to have an area where kids can grow plants. We're going to have water tables. We're going to have sections for walking and sensory paths. It's going to be an amazing outdoor experience for kids to bring the outside into our classrooms.
I am so excited to have this space because there will be a stage so students can perform, students are going to be able to read their writing to each other, and I just think it would be an amazing thing to get to see the kids do.
It's such a great idea that West School and Saks are doing the same. The students want to learn here.
The teachers want to teach here.
And now it's up to you to make it happen. Use this QR code to visit East PTC website to learn more about the project and how you can make this dream a reality for the East School community. What are you waiting for?
You're the one who always tells us to be outside more.
Join in and do your part to continue to make East School one of the best places in Connecticut.
No way, in America to learn.
So we have to give a big thank you to our very talented and creative Clint McLeod who put that video together. So we're fortunate to have this enclosed courtyard at East, but as you can see, it does need a little reimagination to make this a much more functional space. A space where East students can get messy with science experiments and creative during writing sessions, where they can be calm during meditative moments and re-energized with just the change of scenery. For our design criteria, one of the critical components that we needed to address was that the space needed to be able to accommodate 2 classrooms at a time. It also needed to be multifaceted so that it can accommodate the different learning modes, whether it's teacher-led learning, group discussions, independent work with writing, reading, and math. But it also needed to be a place where we can do student presentations. And so now I'm going to have Emily walk you through the plan.
So this is the plan. There are 2 full classrooms on either end of the space section, The area labeled number 1 is our outdoor classroom with a semicircle made out of brick and stone. So students can sit on that semicircle. There's going to be a outdoor-proof whiteboard. And the floor will also be made out of rubber tiles, so students could also sit on the ground. And then on the bottom right is the second full class space, which is going to be the stage with bench seating and a shade structure to keep kids out of the sun. And then number 3 is the bottom center. That's the science area. We've worked with Mrs. Nori, the science teacher, to address her needs. There are going to be 4 water stream tables for her to do lessons on erosion and water. And there will also be a vertical garden wall behind those tables where she can grow plants with the class. Area number 5, which is sort of the top middle, is a reading nook, so a more intimate space for a teacher to pull a small group of kids to work on reading, or even a reading specialist or another type of teacher who has a smaller group. And then area number 4 are 3 picnic tables. They'll be ADA compliant, so accessible for wheelchair. And then space number 6 is our sensory wall. It will have a magnetic chalkboard and will work on fine motor, tactile, and movement skills for children. Space 7, bottom left, is a traverse wall. It's not a climbing wall where students go up. It's just across a very long area of brick that is currently there. And it will also have rubber tile, so if a child does fall, even though they're only a foot or 2 off the ground, it'll be a softer fall for them. And then finally, area 8 is the new paver pathway, which is sort of actually the most expensive part of the project. And it will lead through the entire courtyard from one entrance to the other. And this courtyard is surrounded on all 4 sides by the school. So it's completely interior to the campus. These are the 2 renderings of the 2 full classrooms. On the top is the classroom 1, which is something we're going to work on right away. And then the bottom is the classroom with the stage and the shade. And then these are some inspirations we used for the 4 other spaces. The top left is the reading nook with some Adirondack chairs. The top right is, to give you an idea of the sensory area, with the magnetic chalkboard. The bottom right is the water tables and the vertical garden, and the bottom left is the traverse wall. Lydia's going to tell you about what we can do this year.
Right. So with that, we've split the OLC into 2 parts. And so with your approval, we would like to begin phase 1 this summer, which would begin by preparing the area by removing all the trees, the existing shrub, as well as the very tired asphalt pathway that we have there. We would replace it with the brand new pathway that Emily had mentioned that would extend from the north and south entrances to the building. It would also include classroom 1, the science center, new picnic tables, and some privacy walls, which you can see along where the classrooms are on the very top of the picture. So this is our cost estimate for doing this project. As you know, with current pricing increases with materials, you see that the preparation is about $84.55. The main pathway is the largest expense. It's $22,000 to lay that in with materials and labor. Classroom number 1 has built-in brick wall seating with a bluestone cap, and then it would have the rubber tile surface as well. And we would also put in decorative stone that would go along the entire west wall with some plantings as well. The furniture would comprise of 3 new picnic tables, 4 water tables, as well as an outdoor whiteboard. The landscaping is pretty minimal this go around. We really wanted to just focus on the areas that we were making new. So we would have some plantings around the classroom 1, and then again, a couple of plantings along the west wall where the new decorative stone would be in the drainage area, as well as irrigation. That would also be part of this phase 1. The project management fee is $2,800, and so the total comes out to $59,255. This doesn't include the privacy wall, as we're still trying to work out the perfect solution for that that's safe for the kids and for the emergency exits. So we'll be presenting that at a later time. And with that, we'll open it up to any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. It's very exciting, and I have to say that is one of the most effective fundraising videos I've ever seen. It worked, obviously. Very impressive. Questions? Erica?
I just wanted to say, I'm thrilled to see East taking on this project, and thank you to you, Lydia, and to Emily, and to the PTC and all the parents. It is a big undertaking to do an outdoor learning center, and you need your entire community, and so congratulations on raising the money for the first phase, and good luck. But we've seen over at West just what a tremendous asset it can be for learning, and I'm so excited to see, East on that journey as well.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, and thank you to all the parents in the community who helped make it possible, and to you both and your PTC colleagues for all of your hard work and seeing this through. So on that, we will motion to accept the donation of $59,255 from the East School PTC. First, Penny. Second, Dan. All in favor? All right, thank you. Have a good night. Okay, next up, more good news, South School PTC donation.
This is Board of Ed Holiday Edition.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. I'm Matt Kaskak, the principal at South. I'm here with Mrs. Robinson, our assistant principal, Mrs. Catherwood, and Ms. O'Brien, our co-presidents of our PTC. And keeping the theme of using our outdoors, we've learned a lot about using outdoors over the last 18 to 20 months and expanding our learning environments. We have a small courtyard, smaller than East Schools, and we've added a few things to that. Last year you approved a shade tent in there. We also do a lot outside with our school garden, which has been growing over the years. And one of the things that we've learned, I think, at all three schools over the last couple of months is that the cohorting that we had last year, where we had one class together, this year we continued it, but with two classes together. And we're finding that it works a little bit better. And whether we carry on that for years to come, we're not sure, but not having 125 kids playing in the same small blacktop area in the winter months when the field's either too soggy or too cold or too snowy and the play structures are covered with snow, 125 kids in one blacktop area is not really the best way to handle things for recess. So we've been spreading out, and we are using our kindergarten playground more. We're using our bus platform and bus circle more, and our blacktop on the lower playground. And what we found is that the kids are still looking for more things to do. So one of our teachers brought this idea to us from their own child's school in another town, and we've done some exploring and looking into seeing how we can make these resources fit with us. And I'm going to turn it over to our PTC presidents now, who have done some research on pricing and product, and they'll share with you what our request is.
Yes. Thank you, Matt. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Catherwood. We're looking at, we'd love to fund some blacktop graphics for our South School playgrounds, both in the kindergarten playground and the lower playground. We also had a very successful fundraiser, our Giving Tree fundraiser, and we had some very generous donations from our parents, which we're very thankful for. These blacktop playgrounds are interactive, colorful designs that we think would enhance the children's recess experience and also encourage outdoor active play. How do I move this? There we go. We think they could also be incorporated into classroom activities such as math and letter games or physical education classes. We're speaking with a company called Edumarkings. They use heat and a sealant to adhere the designs to the blacktop surface. The designs are non-slip and chemical-free, and they can last up to 10 years. Julie's going to talk a little bit about the designs that we're looking at. We pulled some of the administrators and teachers, and these are what we narrowed it down to. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We do have two different blacktop areas at South School. There's a kindergarten playground, and then there's a lower playground with a larger blacktop. And these are some of the sample markings that we're looking at installing in the kindergarten playground. We did get feedback from the kindergarten teachers, from Zoe and Matt, and also from each grade level leader as to which ones the children and the teachers would find the most fun. Some additional examples for the lower playground, which is for grades 1 to 4. As Laura mentioned, these aren't paint. They're material that's adhered to the blacktop, similar to when you're on a road, a turn arrow, or when it says like turn here, it's not paint. It won't come off and can be plowed over if needed and shoveled over. The individual designs range from $1,600 to $4,300 for the super colorful ones. Most are average around $2,500. And the company does give a discounted price when you purchase a package, especially for schools and nonprofits. So we estimate if we were to purchase 8 to 10 designs, that comes out to about $13,000 to $15,000. And the funds are coming from our recent Giving Tree fundraiser. Just as a side note, we thought it would be fun to have parents give the opportunity to vote on one of the designs, since the Giving Tree funds did come from directly our parent community. Just a nice way to get them involved. Oh, and that's it.
Yeah, any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? I think this is, it's very exciting. Thank you. It's innovative. I've never seen anything like it, so it'll be great to, I'm sure the kids will absolutely love it, and thank you again, and to the community for their generosity. That, we'll ask for a motion to accept the donation of up to $15,000 from the South School PTC. Phil, second. Dan, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our first round of action items, and then we'll move on to reports and recognitions. And first on our agenda this evening is the healthier school start times update. Dr. Lutzy.
Sure. And I want to thank the board for rearranging the agenda a bit to put those action items up front so that our guests could share their information with us and then get on home to their families. So thank you for doing that. The topic of healthier school start times could be a few hours here at any given time, as we all know, and I'm going to spare us that tonight and just really start off by saying that I think it would probably be in everyone's interest to schedule some time the week in January when we return for the Board of Ed, the administration, to sit together and spend that time. I know some of the board members have been on this journey since 2017. Others are coming new into it, and I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and well-informed, because this is a very complex discussion and consideration, as we hear and as our email inboxes tell us on a regular basis. There are strong feelings on all sides of this question, and rightfully so, because we're talking about the health and wellness of our children, and we're talking about a whole systems change in order to make it a healthier system. So I'm going to start with that, and maybe that relieves a little pressure, maybe it doesn't, but go into a little bit of information to share about sort of where we are, how we got here, and certainly open to any discussion, answering any questions, getting into any specifics. And I'll also invite Dr. Keating to join in any part of the conversation appropriately. As you know, as our Director of Finance and Operations, Joanne works directly with Roy Walder, our transportation coordinator, very regularly, and Joanne is, as the entire cabinet has been a very strong partner at all of these efforts from the beginning. Joanne on the technical side, others in different discussion, Dr. Carenti as part of the roadshow, as we've spent, I can't even tell you how many hours speaking with teachers and parents and students, through the years, as the ideas have come and evolved and discussions have occurred. I want to be, very, very clear about sort of how we got to where we are and why we're here. And I'll start with the second question. We're here because we are striving to ensure that the decision that we make as a board, as a district, is the best possible decision on behalf of all of the students and families and staff and everybody that is a part of our school community. I do believe, and we say it often, the New Canaan school community is truly special. And they deserve nothing less than our absolute very best. And that's what we've always been delivering and doing. And that's why this potential scenario is on the table. But I want to also be clear that it's potential. We haven't dismissed one to go for the other. This was really about vetting decisions, working the idea through, and continuing to be open-minded and flexible and to approach the question as scientists seeking to learn more, not as people trying to, not as anything else. We are working hard, following Adam Grant's work and others that we've seen, to keep an open mind and to be as nimble and flexible in our thinking, which I've got to say we've gotten very, very good at these last couple of years, and out of necessity. But there are pros and cons to either of the scenarios that are under discussion. And I'm confident in saying that either one is a viable solution. So it's really about where the information comes. One of the sort of challenges that we've had in the past, we've waited for that one decisive piece of data that sort of tips the scales in one direction or the other. That's an overwhelming thing. And it just doesn't work like that, right? We're talking about making a change to a system that's highly complex, lots of moving parts, but I would encourage all of us to think about sort of where we are, where we're going, without holding out hope that, that is it the sword of Damocles, that's going to come down and just be the decisive thing and end the discussion. It doesn't work that way. Instead, it becomes, we gather as much information as we can. We continue to question ourselves and each other throughout this, and we strive to make the best decision that we can for the most people. Understanding there are trade-offs in everything that we do, but we want to do our absolute very best. I will say, part of why this came forward, as you know, is that it's the scenario we had before was developed pre-COVID, before the pandemic. Again, it is a system that other districts have put in place with great success. We've spoken to several of them up around the Boston area. It's something that could work, but it does have trade-offs. Just like the scenario that we've been discussing recently has trade-offs. It would work, but there are trade-offs. And it's really probably in the conversation and discussion thinking about what those trade-offs are and what the board and the community and everyone is best prepared to move forward, right? The same goals exist that we've had from the beginning. As you know, those haven't changed. And it is about putting a healthier system in place for our kids. We want to do that. We have kids who are waiting at the bus stop at 6:28 in the morning right now, and that's not right. I spoke to several of them that are waking up before 6 a.m. in the morning to get ready to go to school because of their bus stop. And we can do better than that. Because these same kids are out late at night. They're still taking full classes. They're involved with all the sports and athletics, everything else. So I said this in the podcast. I just want to reiterate it. This is not a question of if, it's a question of how. Right? I think that the board is committed to making this happen, to making a change, and we just need to further define what that is. In our conversation in the workshop, I had suggested a timeline of sort of having a strong sense of where the board is coming out prior to taking the budget forward to the town, which would be the third week in January, or fourth week in January, actually, this year because of the way we come back. If that's just to put a target out there as far as the timeline goes, but if that's not possible because we're still gathering information, then we'll do the right thing and continue to gather information and make the most informed decision. Because I do think what's most important for the town bodies and everyone to understand as we go forward with our budget is that the board is committed to making a change. And so we will be looking at resources in the budget. As you know, we've talked about that a little bit. There are some resources in the budget this year for an implementation. We've talked to the Board of Finance about using that, moving that money forward so that it's a 50% next year, and then the other 50% the year after that. So there are ways that we continue to do this implementation that is as cost effective as possible. And I say that also because we had committed very early on when that money was approved that if we did not adjust school start times, that we wouldn't be using that money for any other purpose. Right. So of course we're going to stay true to that commitment, which is the right thing to do. I think I right out of the gate fell into the trap of not really summarizing kind of what our current times are and what the one scenario is and what the other is. But I know the board is very well informed on all of this. So as you know, it's our 7th through 12th grade is starting at 7:30 in the morning, which is probably isn't too far from average start time if you look across Connecticut and across schools, but is due in part to the size of our town, the number of roads we have, the speed limits, all of that. It does mean that some of our kids, like I said, are getting up before 6 o'clock in the morning in order to be prepared to come to school for the day. The goal is to shift that later. The science talks about 8:30 as a target for adolescents, which is why we had, in part, that it informed the scenario A. I have to name them something, so I'll call that A and I'll call the new one B, if that's okay with everybody. If anyone has more creative names, you're welcome to share them. But we looked at scenario A. As you know, there was quite a bit of conversation back in the spring about moving the elementary, the first tier, to at least 8 o'clock. So we looked at, how can we do this and how can it all be pieced together. Roy Walder has been working on our routing and working on the putting the schedule together since the beginning. We've been talking all throughout. It's tight, to be fair, that 8 o'clock start on elementary and trying to have the 7 through 12 starting at 8:30 is a tight turnaround, because the buses do have to canvass the whole town in order to pick up the high school students and the middle school students. And so there are some efficiencies that you pick up by starting with your neighborhood schools, but you do still have to get out from those schools, pick up students, the entire town, and bring them all back to the southern end of town. But we're looking at it. Again, it is a viable solution. But I mentioned that it's a little tight because that's part of what led to our sort of talking a little bit about and brainstorming a bit about are there other options that are worthwhile to consider. And so one of the differences, as I think the board's well aware, when you have elementary school students, it's a tight window of drop-off time, right? Because those kids have to be supervised from the minute they walk off the bus. And so we look to keep the drop-off time pretty tight to the start of the school day. 7 through 12, the students don't need the same level of supervision. So if you have a couple of buses that have to flip out to get out to other parts of town that are a longer run, you can drop those students off a few minutes earlier at the high school and pick up that time to make that middle tiers run, if that's making sense. Now, one of the things we're looking at, and I'd hope to have the graphic for you tonight, I just don't, but this is why I think a workshop should be in our future, the week we get back. Roy's developing right now the graph to see the cumulative pickup times for all students on the first wave, and then the cumulative drop-off times for the last tier in the afternoon. And essentially what that'll show is how early is the first pickup, at what point do we have 25%, 50%, 75% of students picked up, and then bringing everybody in. We're pretty optimistic at this point that the earliest will be at or around 7:10 in the morning for all students. And that would be the pickup now that we're looking at about 6:28. We're thinking that instead of that being the earliest, we could get to about 7:05, 7:10. And Roy told me around 7:10, so that's why I put 7:05 out there, because you never overpromise and underdeliver, right? But he's working on it. In order to do those graphs, he has to actually create all new routes for all of our existing kids. So it's a lot of work, and he's been doing it and doing it well. We'll get there soon. But optimistically, or I think realistically, we're looking at around that 7:10 for the earliest pickup. So as far as bus times go, for the earliest child, you're looking at about a 40-minute shift by moving the school the half hour. And then we're thinking that the runs probably wouldn't be much more than 30, 35 minutes. So really, when you start to think about where most of the kids are going to be picked up, it's really going to be at around 7:30 or so in the morning. And again, advantages are the buses are out already and staged, and then they start picking up and driving straight into the school when they're canvassing, going through the whole town that way. And because we have more buses due to the size of the elementary tier, there'll be fewer kids riding on each of the 712 buses, right? So that'll make for shorter runs. So that helps. And then the buses would have to, of course, flip out and go get the elementary students and bring them to their neighborhood schools. And we think that will help having the neighborhood schools in the middle tier a little bit, because right now what happens for our first and second tier, the buses drop off for the 7 through 12, but then they have to canvass the whole town again to pick up 5th and 6th grade and bring them all the way back down. And then you have East and West, on the last tier. And we think that putting the neighborhood schools, and again, Roy is working all the numbers now, but we think having the neighborhood schools in the middle would help to keep that to a 30-minute window instead of the 50-minute window, 45-minute window we have now between first and second tier, due to that need to go from far south all the way north and come back far south. And then Saks 5th and 6th alone in the last tier. The advantage again is the number of buses that you have for just the 2 grades. So I'm explaining the scenario B a lot, but I think it is important and fair to also just explain a little bit about scenario A. And again, we'll get into more details about this. But some of the advantages to scenario A were that again, the neighborhood schools in the morning, where they help us in scenario B by being able to compress that. What it means in the morning is you can pick up the kids a little bit later, because it's going to be a shorter bus run, because the buses, they just don't have to travel as far, right? So that helps. When they drop those kids, so we were looking at, for those pickups, again, 7:10, I believe, was about the earliest, but half of them weren't picked up until after 7:30, as I recall. And I'll have those graphs for you. So it's similar, on the pickup times for the elementary students in that scenario. The efficiency we were capturing there was the buses then could flip out from the neighborhood schools and wouldn't have to canvass the whole town as they do now between the first and second tier. They're already out there, and that saves you a little bit of time for that 7 through 12, and then having, again, 5th grade at the end. The research does speak to 8:30 as or later as ideal start time for adolescents. And this is grounded in science and thousands of research studies that talks about circadian rhythm for teenagers and adolescents and how things shift. And it shifts until the time you hit adolescence till about age 25, as I'm reading the research. So it's not a short-term thing. And what happens really is things just shift later. Students have a very hard time, children have a hard time going to sleep before 10:30, 11 o'clock or so. Or if you're like my daughter's in college, before 2 o'clock, I guess. But the shifting that 8:30 was also an important consideration, according to the research, because the most restorative sleep that students get really occurs during that window between, say, 4 o'clock and 6:30, 7 o'clock or so. So there's also a window of time that's sort of the maximum restorative sleep. And this, again, comes from different conferences and research and articles and everything that we've been looking at and experiencing and sharing through the years. And this is why I think that it would be really helpful for us to spend a chunk of time together so we can kind of walk through that and other pieces. The idea around the elementary going first, again, it has been implemented successfully in places up around Boston and other spots. And the idea there is that the elementary children are not experiencing the same type of physiological shift. So they're much more malleable as far as their sleep times go. You can kind of sleep train them at that age to go to bed a little bit earlier if they need to in order to get up a little earlier. There's just more flexibility there. Whereas with adolescents, like a lot of other things with adolescents, they're very stubborn. And they're not quite as flexible or trainable as far as the sleep goes because it's biological. Right? So there are other factors, as I know you're well aware, and certainly glad to talk and answer questions and get into any details that you think, would be helpful or relevant. Do want you to know again that it's in the spirit of inquiry and recognizing the importance of the decision that we, after discussion, made the decision to bring this idea forward as well. Maybe it serves to test out the previous scenario A. Maybe it becomes the scenario that's going to be implemented. But either way, I think we're better for it, because better to have the debate and the discussion and think everything through, as a board as we move forward. And something that, we're going to be shifting the ecosystem of students' lives, right? And so, and families and everything that we do. So we want to take all of that into account as we go forward with what it's going to be.
Thank you. So we'll take some questions and have a discussion about it. Brendan?
So there's for me, I haven't made up my mind. There's a lot more I want to learn, but I just want to start by saying thank you for raising this. For just given the background, it would have been a lot easier to not raise it. But and it's not at all surprising that you raised it, because you want to do what's absolutely best, as you said. So I appreciate it. One thing that I was thinking about was the block schedule, and there are really two questions I have. One, I just can't remember pre-block schedule how many first period frees kids typically had relative to the block now. And the second question is, as it relates to the middle school, is there any contemplated change to the scheduling there? I realize that's a much bigger question or issue, but 7th and 8th graders don't have the block, right? So there's no impact to them from that change. And that's an important time as well for kids, just in terms of biology and sleep changes. So,
yep.
Thank you.
Sure, I can sort of touch on them now and get more information later. It gets confusing, because schedules are confusing to everyone except the teachers and the students who live in the schedule. But what we had at the high school prior to the block schedule was students would schedule 8 periods. 7 of them would meet per day. There was a morning rotation and an afternoon rotation, and a period would drop each day over an 8-day cycle. Piece of cake, right? So what happened is, if you had a free in the morning rotation, then once every 8 days you would have it in that first block, or maybe even twice as you look at it as it moves through.
Right, but
only if you had it in the morning
Right.
block, right? And it would be a 45-minute period all in. So it would be a shorter period than the block, which is the 85 or so minutes, right? So you would have, that's what was there. But you had to have in the morning rotation.
Right, so
Or
you
if
could
you had
go
in the afternoon rotation, you would have a leave early.
So you could have a semester without a free in the morning.
I would say most students did not have a free in the morning most of the time.
Yeah.
Right, and there might be, I'd just say less than 50%, like less than half for sure.
Right.
Right, because it would all have to sort of work out that way. Now,
And so now,
and because in the free, I'm sorry, but we also put the PE class and and the science labs into the frees as well in the old schedule like that. So not only would it have to be in the rotation, but it would have to be the first period would have to not be PE or health or science lab in the rotation. So, I mean, I can go back to Paul Gallo, who can just figure this stuff out off the top of his head, because he's been creating the schedule for so many years. But I think now we looked at it this year, right, with the schedule that we have, and we did make the sort of strategic decision to rotate the entire block at the high school starting this year. So in the past, they were looking at a morning and an afternoon rotation again in the block. I think primarily because that's what people were used to, because that's just how the high school had worked. For the mornings would rotate and the afternoon would rotate, and that's just what people sort of became acclimated to. And after talking with Bill Egan and sort of working through, we decided that the rotating the entire schedule would be better, in part for this reason, and there's some other reasons too. So in the schedule that we have now, as you know, it's an A-B schedule, and 4 periods meet each day, and they rotate from 1 to 4 each through. So over the course of 8 days, every class meets 4 times, once in each of the 4 blocks, right? Mm-hmm. So when we looked at that schedule, when Paul had created it, he didn't really have this in mind, so he sort of just spread everything out. We asked him to go back into it and to sort of strategically try to create first period freeze for students based on the block without changing anything else. So he really just looked at moving some labs, moving some PE classes, right? Mm-hmm. And what he came up with was that 91% of the students could have a first period free if you did it strategically that way. And 46% of the students could have 2 or more first periods free, right? So a little less than half could have 2 or more. Now those are, and it's actually spread out across the grades. So as you might imagine, our seniors would have the most chance. 99% of the seniors would have it. Our sophomores are the overachievers at 81% would have it.
Yeah.
Right. And then juniors at 8 and freshmen at 8. So it also, the way we schedule, students schedule 7 classes because that 8th is the PE and the lab and things. So that is pretty much guaranteed in everyone's schedule as that lab. As a skinny. It's not necessarily the entire block every time, because sometimes we also, again, complexities of scheduling, we split the block in half, because for a PE class or for a science lab might be half of that period. So this would be at least half, if not more, of the, or if not a full block for everybody.
So I think based on that, it's roughly 10 minutes on average relative to the old schedule, just at the high school. If you just average it out, it's not going to be that for every kid every day, but, over the course of the year, it's something like that, I think.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that as we're looking at this, and again, this is one of the reasons we thought, let's bring this forward for discussion. We're talking about systems, and we're talking about improving on systems. And so some of these efforts, although they may appear small in isolation, do have a cumulative effect. So, a little here and a little there. On the day of a sleep-in for a student here, if they have the full block, that's 85 minutes later. That's a significant chunk of time for students to do X, whether it's to sleep, to catch up, to just slow down and have whatever that use of time is best for that individual. That's a pretty significant thing. So we just, because part of this too, of course, one of the goals around healthier start time was to continue to address the stress that students experience, the pressure that they're under, and the pace of the school day. And I'll tell you, just, this, again, the shift to the block schedule, really people have reported to me, they feel like the treadmill has gone from, 65 to 25. Like they can sort of keep up with things now in a whole new way versus walking in the door and feeling like they're running all day long. So, if that helps a little, just the block schedule itself, and then the sleep-ins help a little bit, and then a shift in the time, we're looking at system, the interrelationship of the components of the system.
Penny.
So I guess one of the things that I'd like to know is what's the data on whether or not students who have a first period free come in at the regular time, or they actually come in later? Because if you're driving, you're a junior and you have a car, you're driving, you clearly can come in. But if you're a freshman or a sophomore, or if you're my junior and senior one of them didn't drive. I drove. So anyhow, but I'd just like to know, even when you have that, can we get some statistics on how often it's taken advantage of? And then, I think this has been an incredible sort of long journey. The only thing we might all agree on is that we know that the current system is not the best system for our students, and we know that we can do better for them. And I think the change that the board agreed on, and I also think we know that change is hard, and it's going to disrupt a lot of things, and we're going to work to implement whatever this board comes up with as smoothly as we can. But I think that this board has to be fully behind the change that we come forward with. So I think it'll be really good to have that work session and go through all the old research. Particularly one of the points that always made a lot of sense to me was how the adolescent sleep is the best sleep that you get when you're a teen, is that late morning or early morning, but the sleep right before you wake up, and that we wanted to get as much of that sleep as we could for our students, particularly because of all the stress that they're under. So if we're sold, if we're going to reopen this, I actually would be interested in looking at another scenario, because why keep it simple? But an 8 a.m. seems too early for me, for the high school, and for the way that they work. It's a huge improvement over what we have right now, but it still seems early to me. So I wonder, because we've been able to compress the tiers a little bit, if it's possible, why wouldn't we be able to look at, say, 8:15 for 7th through 12th grade, 8:45 for K through 4, and then 5th and 6th at 9:30? If you'd have to tell me if that would be, the math on that timing is right, or if it'd have to be later. But, if a lot of the activities that you had with 5th and 6th grade occurred in the hour before school started, that would still be occurring from 8:30 to 9:30. So you would not be, it would require, parents or carpooling or things like that. There wouldn't be bus service for that period. But, I would just like to know, if we're going to start thinking out of the box and start looking at new scenarios, and we've been able to compress, you would at least get a lot more benefit for the grades 7 through 12. And for those students who are getting that great REM sleep right before they have to wake up to go to school, if every 15 minutes counts. So that, I guess I'd be interested in that. I don't know what others think.
Well, I'm just quickly on that, Bob, if you want. Yep. As long as it stays in the sequence that we're talking about, so we're not looking at building a new scenario. You're looking at sort of shifting and understanding that each one is contingent upon the one before. Then we can, as Roy finalizes this scenario in this order, then we can look at that shift. Like, he'll compress as much as he can as he's building this scenario out, but do it in a way that's going to work, because that's, of course, the key. And where failed implementations have occurred, it's where they've overpromised and underdelivered, right? They said that we can do this in 5 minutes, and it actually took 20. So we're not going to fall into that trap. So once Roy pieces it all together, we can look to see, if we move 1, 5, 10, 15 minutes, then just all of them would. And that's a slightly different discussion. And I think it's a good one to have. Yeah, we'll have that ready for when we get together as a group.
Bob?
Yeah, I was going to say, sort of on the element, on the scenario A, the first time around, I was pushing for the elementary kids to get closer to 8, away from 7:30. I would agree. Let's get the high school as close. If it's going to be the first tier, let's do our best to move it as much as we can within. I know the police chief would probably hate me, but let's raise the speed limit 5 miles an hour. That'd be great, right? That might help.
Okay.
But, I agree. I think we should try to optimize it for everybody, and if we can get to 8:15, 8:10, whatever it is, in the end, let's do it. I agree.
I think, equally important on that point is we have to look at the end of the day, so for whatever shifts we make in the morning, we have to look at what happens at the end. And that's the trade-off, I think, of all these scenarios where, it would be nice to mix and match, but that's not the reality that we're living in. And so it's, whatever you do in the morning impacts the afternoon.
Agreed.
And that's where we start to hear a lot of feedback about, in addition to the importance of sleep in the morning, it's what happens in the afternoon and how, parents and kids are feeling about, childcare, the load of work, extracurricular, carpooling, whatever it may be.
Yep.
So, Phil, hold on. Phil, you had your hand up.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, and just, kind of picking up on that thought, with a proposal like Penny's or 8:30, or let's say the science changes and it's optimal to get high school kids to a 9 o'clock start. How mindful do we need to be of the other schools in our DIRG? Because if we're starting high school kids at, let's say, 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and Wilton or Westport or someone else is starting them at 8, how's that going to work with like athletics and the JV team games starting at this time and waiting around? Like, it seems like we would have to be mindful and kind of work almost in conjunction with the other schools in our district to some degree, right?
Yeah, we do that through the FCAC, right? Because that's the conference that we compete in. And those are at schools from Greenwich to Trumbull to Danbury, over to Westport, Fairfield. They're all, generally, many of them are in a state of discussion. Some have shifted. Some are looking at maybe shifting back due to other issues. There's a couple. Wilton is the one that did it a long time ago, back over 10, 15 years ago, I believe. I'd have to look. But they are, they release, what's really most important, at 2:45. In the afternoon, and do that. But yeah, we're in conversation with the FCI quite a bit about the shift. And even a few years ago, the state was looking at putting something in legislation that required schools to start all schools to shift their start times, following what California was doing at the time. But again, I think that was another initiative that was disrupted due to the close, the shutdown.
Okay. Penny?
So, just having been through this for the last 4 years, Dr. Lutzy is right. There is no perfect solution. And what we have now is not the best that we can do as a district. So I think we clearly have to do better. And we are going to get voices of resistance, and they'll be strong because people really care about this and people should care about it. But I think we have to each person has to decide what they want to focus on and how they want to decide it. I personally have always, focused on the science of it and the science of the sleep and trying to figure out how best to optimize it. I've been very persuaded by the presentation showing how much stress our students are under. So I think that all the things that we're doing to reduce the stress are important. I think this also could be a key to reducing the stress. And I think we need to, these are changes that are really hard for families. And so my focus has been on the students. And that's, best interest of the child. And so that's what I'd like to hear about from the administration as we, move forward and make this final choice.
Brendan?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask again, because I think we flipped to the next one. But is there anything that we could expect in the future around the schedule at the middle school?
I made a note to go back to it when Penny was talking.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Because I think based on the math here between bus times and the block schedule at the high school, it's probably 50 minutes roughly relative to what we had 2 years ago. But I'd love 7 and 8 are important in the schedule there.
Absolutely, they are, because we know the students are going through, entering in adolescence at that time, and it can be very disruptive for families. So I have to talk theoretically just a little because we haven't sort of worked through it yet. But in that shift, so in the scenario B, one of the things we're doing is separating SACs on the first and the last tier. Right now, they're back-to-back tiers, 50 minutes apart, so they mirror each other's schedule because they share so much staff across the grades. One of the things we'd be looking at would be, can they run a little more independently, share less staff, and have sort of more lower division staff and upper division staff? And if so, then you create more flexibility to make a change at the middle school that might be more in line with the high school kind of thing. Now, they don't really have freeze the same way in middle school. They don't, high school has study halls, they have free periods that sort of rotate through. Middle schoolers don't really have that in the way that this is all set up. So we have to, I don't know that it would offer the same relief. Because again, middle schoolers, we use the workshop period is like their study hall they have every day. And in that period, they're sometimes doing their own thing, sometimes meeting for music, sometimes getting extra help. Like it's much more scheduled because the kids are younger. When they get to high school, they can have that additional freedom. So I don't want to I want to be careful of any promises, but we are looking at the schedule and what can we do and maybe it would open up some opportunities to share a little bit between the high school and the middle school. And that's kind of been a goal of ours too.
Thank you.
Erica?
So building off of Phil's comment about the FCAC, when we meet in January for the workshop, will we be able to see, the number of students that have been pulled out this fall and under these scenarios? How many students, will we be able to do a comparison of like what the pullout students have been, and then also like teams? Like, is it the same teams that are repetitively getting pulled out early for sporting events as opposed to it's spread pretty evenly over the athletes to know just kind of what the impact of that is? Yep,
I hope to have something more formal to share tonight. Again, it's just not ready for prime time, but we can look at everything's imperfect, right? So that data point will be if the buses left at the time that they're leaving now, who would have been pulled out and how frequently, as we look at it. Then there's more discussion, of course, to be had about could they have been pulled out? Could the bus have rolled later and things like that?
Right,
So we'll look at all of that. And we can have, if it's a workshop, we could have our athletic director join us for a period of time and just share some insights and experiences that he has and things like that, for sure.
Great.
Yep.
And then also for the different scenarios, childcare. So understanding, Right now we have early birds at East and West, under these different scenarios, will we have them at all 3 elementary schools? Will they still run for an hour? Will they run for less? And then also the just right at school program, will that be with 3 elementaries? Will it be the elementaries and, and
Yep.
Saks? And just understanding what the childcare scenarios will be for each of these.
Sure, and I'm actually glad you brought that up, because we are, regardless of where this goes, we are committed to increasing the opportunities for childcare for kids. So we are still looking at partnering with Right at School and having them run programs at each of the elementary schools. Whether it's the scenario A or scenario B, the need is there. We're looking at a half an hour difference. So that's the program that would go right up till 6 o'clock and be flexible from 1 to 5 days, and be able to and really be a rich experience for kids to go through. Also talking again with the Nature Center and their program, and they're continuing to expand that, and the work that the Y is doing. So there's, people have heard the cry, the calls, and they're stepping up with different ways to help kids and to provide that coverage, whether it's an hour or 2 here or there, or again, like the Right at School program, that can go right up till 6 o'clock at night. So we are still going to continue moving forward with that while this discussion is occurring, because we're going to need it either way. As far as early bird goes, I think we look and see what time school's starting. If there's a need for early bird, if it's an 8:30 start and there's a need for families who are dual working families, others, for students to have somewhere to go, we'll do it. We'll create that program. We're here to meet those kinds of needs. So if there's not a need, then we wouldn't. But if people reach out and said we've done it just for a handful of families in the past. If they need it, we're here. It's what we do.
And just to be clear, I think we've always talked about doing early bird for the 3rd tier.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Right,
And
so
yes,
that would
especially
always
wherever
be-
that lands.
Right, wherever that lands, we would have a significant early bird.
And that might be a Right at School program, because there may be enough enrollment where we want it to be a self-contained kind of program that has all, all the resources and everything else that Right at School provides. It may be something else. I think that there's opportunities there for Park and Rec and others to develop some really interesting programs for kids in that 5-6.
Other questions, comments? And I think, what I would encourage board members is to think about our conversation tonight, think about, as you read through the emails, if you have other questions, please send them to us so that, we can make the time, our next meeting time, really meaningful and productive, because little things will come up, and, the community members are good at pointing out, pros and cons to different scenarios, so it's helpful. I guess my request or question would be, just thinking about what are the, from an administration's perspective, what are the concerns with your major concerns with each scenario? What are the sort of the biggest risks you see with implementing A and B? And you don't have to answer that now. That's a request for the next time we meet, because you mentioned in scenario A that 8:30 may not be 8:30 for tier 1. So I would want to know, I think it's helpful to sort of flesh that out and say, are we at 8:30 or is it 8:35? Because I think, we know that 5 minutes in the life of any school system, family, it matters. So I think that would be a helpful data point. And also, I think, just as we think about the new scenario, that half hour, what does that translate to? And I think, Brendan, you were hitting on this too, like in terms of minutes, what does it translate to? And, what is how meaningful is it? And what is the real benefit at the end of the day as compared to, scenario A? So just thinking through and fleshing those out a little bit more, I think would be helpful for us as a board when weighing side by side. Because I think it's more than just a half hour. We have to look at, as you say, the system and the pros and cons that come with each of those. So.
Great.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay. So our work continues.
Yes, it does. Maybe after Christmas.
Yes, everyone needs a break for sure. Okay.
Speaking of.
Another challenging topic. We'll move on to COVID update.
Yeah, it's, again, I'll be as quick as I can. I'm glad to answer any questions or have whatever discussion. It's been a tough couple of days as far as case rates go. Our nurses are working incredibly hard and doing a brilliant job of it. But we're seeing positive cases across all of our schools now. We've got, well, on the dashboard you'll see it's students. We've got 14 at the high school, 7 at the middle school, and 16 across the 3 elementary schools for kids. And we've got a couple of cases with staff as well. Again, 4 at the high school, 1 at Saks, and 2 across the elementary schools. Those have led to a significant increase in the number of quarantines. We are being very precise and careful with the quarantines. You know, it's kind of that image of using a scalpel or a hammer. You know, we are really being very careful and trying to target students that have to quarantine without quarantining anybody needlessly, certainly. But the numbers are going up a bit. You know, South is our highest right now with 29 quarantines. We've got 25 over at Saks and 11 at the high school and a few others. So given the news of the weekend and how things started sort of cascading a bit with closures and other things going on in New York City and what have you, I wanted to get a message out to the community today just to let them know that we know how to do this. We've been doing it. We've been learning an awful lot since this started. I would argue that our schools are some of the safest places for people to be because we've strategically put in place all the mitigation strategies that we have. We have teams of people working in their areas of expertise in order to keep our schools safe. And, we still don't see all that much classroom spread really at all. We have seen a little. That was earlier, and it was, it was a specific case in elementary school. But beyond that, we're not really seeing all that much, which is why we're again, being very strategic with our quarantines. But I wanted to send it out both to, again, let people know our schools are safe and we're implementing all these strategies, but also to encourage people to use them outside of school. They work everywhere, and if we can keep a handle on things, we'll be in good shape. But the reality is, we again exist in a large ecosystem all around us, and so people are watching and seeing what other decisions are being made and getting nervous. So we are preparing just in case, but we do not intend to have to go out. Our goal is to stay in school as long as it's healthy and safe to do so. That is our goal. But as you know, since the very beginning of this, we've been prepared for whatever comes. So we also don't want to put our head in the sand and pretend that there's not something going on around us. So we're going to be prepared in case, but we are optimistic that we'll be able to certainly finish this week and then get into, reopen on the 3rd and bring everybody back into school. Again, because schools are safe places. We've got the ventilation systems, we've got all the mitigation strategies in place and working, and that's, if we all had a team like that around us in our lives outside of school, we'd all be healthier. Let's see, our winter season is well underway, and as you know, the CIC guidelines speak to making a change on December 23rd for student athletes. So what we are looking to do is to invite students, if they would like, to let us, so the change in the regulations from the sports guidelines and the CIC are during competition. Students who are vaccinated have the option to remove their masks. Okay. So we are going into the season with the understanding that everyone would keep them on, and if they show us that they're through the nurses, tell the nurses that they're vaccinated, then it's optional. They can still keep them on. And given recent events and things going on and notices that I'm hearing, I think that may be the case for some students. Others could remove them during games, during competition. And the same rules apply to every school team across the state. So when we're playing against other teams, it's the same expectations exist. It's not like that in every sport. When I think about basketball, I'm thinking about hockey and a few others. There's a few sports like wrestling where it's never safe to keep a mask on while you're wrestling because of what, it can be a choking hazard. There's others like swimming. You're not going to be swimming with a mask on. And even like some indoor track, when you are doing certain events, you can remove the mask as you're doing those events. So that's always been the case for those. So this is really team competitive sports like basketball, girls and boys basketball, hockey. Okay. That would all be done through the nurse. And again, it's trying to keep it very clear that it's an optional thing for people to, first of all, tell us, and second of all, to whether or not they want to wear a mask as they're competing. They would still wear them during practices and things like that. Let's see. I think that what I said today kind of summed up a lot of stuff. So I don't want to necessarily rehash all of that, but I do want, again, people to know that we've been preparing. We've never stopped paying attention to all of this. We've never stopped using the strategies that kept our schools safe and open last year. We're going to keep doing that, this year as this new variant does what it's going to do. According to the DPH and others, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see some numbers that, are higher than we've seen in a while. We know how to handle this. We know how to keep our schools safe. And, our students, our staff, and everybody's working very well together to do that. So I'm optimistic that, regardless of what the storm brings, that our schools will be able to remain open because, we're doing all the right things and all working together to do that. But we have to be prepared just in case. And that's part of what that messaging was all about.
Penny.
So I had two questions. One, from what you read about the science and how important it is to get boosted as well as vaccinated, I was wondering if you could comment on how much we're tracking not only who is vaccinated, but who's been boosted in our staff. Because there does seem to be a difference in immunity levels or severity of disease. And then secondly, I've been noticing with my kids that we have a new sort of protocol going forward that they're doing. And it basically, before they get together with somebody now, they're all testing. And, there was a test performed at my house today, and the woman wore her mask until the test came back negative. And tests are hard to get. So I was wondering if we were doing anything to help our staff get the kind of tests that they might need, to get students get the tests that they might need. I don't know what the town might be doing. I know Jen says that she has free tests for anybody in town that wants it, but it's hard to get them online.
Yep.
Walgreens charged me and never sent them. But so I was just wondering if we were if we could do anything like that as a school and a town community to make these tests available so that we can sort of reduce incidents that way.
Yep. So a couple quick things. On the testing front, I connected recently with the group that was running the testing for us in the past. And we're just talking about the possibility of doing something even in early January for people who may want it, or into the first week of January, and offering some kind of a large-scale clinic. But on the smaller scale, Jen and the health department continues to offer their testing twice a week, and we're actually driving the tests to the lab in partnership with the town. So we're sort of working together to do that. And I would encourage anyone who wants to test. It's a PCR test. It's not a rapid. Which is maybe a little more accurate, but you have to be more patient. But that's on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I believe they can get up to about 60 or so a day. And that's been ongoing all throughout the year. So right through the health department website, you can sign up for that. The availability of rapid tests is tricky, right? We know that what happened with Abbott Labs and shutting down and what they've done. So I know that our health department does have some, and they are willing to help out, and if people are nervous, they're willing to do that too. As far as tracking the boosters goes, we held a booster clinic in October for all of our faculty and staff. It was almost the day it was approved for sort of was it critical, whatever they were calling us at the time. We moved quickly, got that set up, had people come through. I believe we had over 600 staff members come through, but I need to verify that. We haven't asked that question of people, but we do know that our clinic was very well attended. And again, thanks to Jen and Janet and Dr. Pierce and everybody who just jumped right in and started, helping out with the booster shots. So I think that we have a pretty high percentage going, but we haven't asked that question yet. And I don't know that we will. We'll see. I will share that just today we looked again at the numbers, and we are over 97% vaccinated for our faculty and over 94% overall with the staff. That's the 2 shots, not the booster shot.
Right.
Yep.
Bill.
I'm just curious for all the cases that we have in the schools right now, be it students or staff, do we know, have there been any hospitalizations at all?
No, not that I'm aware of. No, and many of them are reporting, very light symptoms, Some of them are aware of it being positive because they tested, as like Penny's talking about, like sort of as a, pro forma, just as a thing before they got together with friends. Others are because there was a positive in the household, so everybody in the household tested and found it. But no, I think at this point, we've not had any hospitalizations that I'm aware of.
All right. Oh, Dan.
I guess to follow on Phil's question, given that's the case, like, should we be looking at things more like hospitalizations versus cases? Because clearly the new variant seems to be more transmissible. It's clearly can be transmitted by vaccinated people or unvaccinated people. And I know we're not necessarily talking about like starting remote in January, but you mentioned it in the letter. It would seem that in this situation, the actual health outcomes wouldn't warrant all of those levels of precautions. So as opposed to a bunch of people getting really, really sick and hospitalizations where you'd be like, absolutely, let's like have these conversations. If it's just people feeling fine and testing positive, or people being asymptomatic, I think it's much more important that those kids are in school, that kids are, there for learning, regardless, like if they're asymptomatic, they're asymptomatic. So I guess at what point do we start to look at the underlying health outcomes as opposed to just a case-driven policy?
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that, I agree that I think that's the direction things are going to go, right? And even all the way back in 2020, the New York Times had an article about how pandemics end. And there were two pieces to it. There's the health threat and then the public's approach. And they sort of bifurcated that to say, the virus, a pandemic virus will still be around and people's approach to it will change. I think over time, that may occur. I think right now, there's concern that, whatever the statistics are, the more cases there are, the more likelihood that something is going to happen. And so I think that epidemiologically, the DPH and others are still, in part, using case rate as an indicator of, as a leading indicator around future hospitalizations and deaths. And so when does that change?
That doesn't seem to follow the actual, outcome related to kids, right? Like the hospitalization numbers are like minimal or zero. So I get it if you were talking about a different population, like we were talking about nursing homes and other people, totally makes more sense. But when you're talking, I think we actually have to look at the health outcomes related to the population that we're talking about, which is basically 5 to 18-year-olds.
Well, as we think about the school community, and agreed, and I think that, as we move through, of course, remembering that if something is low probability, the higher the base number, more likely something can happen. And we've seen that firsthand here, a few years ago with influenza. But when the kids are in school, they're also surrounded by adults and others that are, we've got, 750 staff that are in and out of the schools and in contact with the kids every day. And so, when we think about the entire school community, I think we've got to keep all of that in mind. And again, I'm thinking in time, I think this may be the shift that you're talking about as I've heard language like it's going to shift from pandemic to endemic, and we start to learn to figure out how to live with it and to manage it and navigate it. And I think we've really come a long way in our ability to look at these case rates and feel confident saying we've got this and we know how to manage it. That's a good feeling because we've come this far. At what point do we do that? That's the million-dollar question.
Brendan.
Yeah, to me, it's, I think it's a good question to ask, but, to me, the reasoning, I think, for, continuing to require some quarantines isn't really because of the kids or young adults and the likelihood that they're going to go to the hospital. It's because of all the other people that they interact with on a daily basis, grandparents and, people who may be at risk, some of whom, may be in our buildings, but some of whom may not be. But all of these kids are interacting with far greater people. So I think from a greater, community, state standpoint, I think that's the risk. And when you see, hospitalization rates go up, the risk goes up, and that's why whether you're, 5 years old or 25 or 55, the same sorts of rules apply to reduce the overall spread. I believe. I'm not the scientist, but.
Well, and just to put a point on it, we have had a few hospitalizations among the adults. I mean, your question, Phil, was about the kids and what we've seen. We have had a few hospitalizations among the adults, some very serious complications, and we do currently have one adult hospitalized with COVID from our district.
Okay.
So, I guess to one other kind of question, because I guess it a little leads to the cases, but it also is, and I know it's the DPH quarantine policy, but that's another situation where you have asymptomatic people, kids, that could be out of school for a significant period, and it's not clear that they're, like, to me, it's not clear why, right? So, like, maybe it's an abundance of caution to the broader community or grandparents, but I think just thinking about it from the Board of Ed's perspective is we should be focused on the students, right? And then the other systems can kind of work around that. But I think there's a situation where if somebody's unvaccinated and they sit next to somebody who tests positive, who's also potentially asymptomatic, they're asymptomatic, and then they're going to be out of school for 10 days. So I just think that we need to relook at a lot of these different things, because I think we know a lot more in December 2021 than we certainly did in March 2020. And we've done, the town, the administration has done an excellent job keeping schools open. But I just think the problems that we're facing now and some of the policies around them don't really comport with the kind of facts on the ground. And I think from my perspective, I think the board should be having robust discussions around what are the relative priorities. Like, is it more important for kids that are healthy to not be quarantined and be in school and have the option of learning, or to have some of these other maybe less education related kind of priorities? And I'm not saying I know exactly where we would shake out on that, but I think it's, at this stage in December 2021, I think it's important to discuss.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in if it's okay, because I know we have, it wasn't really on the agenda to discuss. And I think, spending the time to look at where we are with the DPH, the timing of everything and the timeline of what we can expect to happen from the state, I think it is a conversation we can and should have. I just would, suggest we move on tonight and circle back if that's, everyone okay with that?
I'm going to throw a monkey wrench, but I want to ask one question about the CIC guidelines you're talking about. You said the nurses, what is the nurse doing? The nurse is, can you explain that a little better?
Sure. So an email would go out to our student athletes saying that if they would like to essentially notify the nurse that they have been vaccinated, then masks become optional for them. But it would be the nurse collecting that information and housing that information.
So is she collecting, we're back to, like, are we collecting cards, or are we just saying, are you vaccinated, yes or no, right? So what are we doing?
For the student athletes, I think they're being asked to voluntarily give them their cards.
So if the kid's vaccinated but didn't give in his card, he has to wear a mask? So somebody's going to police that? How is that going to work?
Yeah, Jay Egan is
You're gonna have
working
a list
to,
and say you can wear a mask, you can't?
the kids will know.
I
We'll
know
tell
that
the
already. They
tell
know
the
if they
kids.
got the shot. That's why I'm kind of like asking, like, it's back to, like, they know if they've been vaccinated or not,
Mhm.
right? So if they know that, then they can take their mask off if they are, and if they're not, they should keep it on. Now we're talking about, like, somebody's going to be checking this. That just seems a little bit over the top.
I think it's our responsibility to do that, though.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
In
a
order to
it's a
keep,
guideline.
in order to,
I kind of don't.
okay.
I think we should move on. Do we want to keep
Okay.
going?
Mhm.
I guess I just.
No, well,
No, go ahead.
if we're going to keep going, Brendan and then Dan. But,
I'm good.
Okay. I'll try to wrap it up by saying, right now, we're following the guidelines as written. We can
but it's
debate
not.
them, but we're following the guidelines.
But that's not the guideline. There's nothing in the CIC, they're not saying to collect the cards, are they?
They're saying it's the school's responsibility to know, as I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, this is not out of line with what all the other schools in the FCIC are doing.
Okay. To be continued?
I just have one informational request for when we next discuss it. Sorry,
Okay.
not a question, but I know that the executive orders are set to expire February 15th. We'll see if that still happens or not. But I think it would be, it would be very helpful to understand, and I know it won't be perfect, but what do we expect? Let's say they do expire February 15th. What do we expect from like the DPH and the rules and things that will exist beyond February 15th, so that we can at least try and prognosticate a little bit of like what the world could look like for the balance of the school year and have those discussions.
Yeah, okay, fair, thank you. All right, Dr. Keating, statement of accounts. Thank you, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. For the benefit of our new members, I'm going to go over the layout of the report so that you have a good sense of what you're looking at tonight, and get in depth a little bit more than I generally do for this report. So what you have before you tonight is the financial statements for the school district. It includes the operating budget, and then 3 times a year we also provide information on our other funds. So also included in this report are our special revenues funds, which include grants from the federal and state government, the food service program, and then we have facility use, donations, and our summer program. And the last exhibit you have here before you tonight is the internal services fund. So just to get familiar with the layout of this report, the first page is the recap of all of our objects. The detail behind the object numbers are in the next 5 pages, and they all roll up into the recap, so everything balances. The first column in the report, and this is as of November 30th, only including the operating budget, does not include any of our other funds, is a comparison of November 30th of 2020. Then going over from there, it's the 2022 budget. Any transfers that we make, and at this point in the year, we do not make transfers. We do a reforecast of the current year's budget when we're preparing the next year's budget. That's included in the budget presentation you'll have next month. And then what we do is we true up with a transfer between these objects at that time. The next column is the revised budget, which would include any transfers between objects or any special appropriations, followed by expended through the end of the period, encumbered, which means that we have a purchase order or a commitment for salaries under these accounts. So we have planned expenditures against our budget, a combination of the both expended and encumbered in our ending balance. So just for, in terms of an example, last year at this point in time, we spent $29,034,694 as of the end of November, which represented 31.9% of our budget. And if you go to the column entitled Expended through November 30th, 2021, you'll see it's 32.3. We're very consistent in this manner year over year when you take a look at our expenditures. Last year, 31.9% of the budget. This year, 32.3. If you take a look at our encumbrances at this time last year, it was 57.8%. This year, it's 57.7, for a total of 89.7 for last year compared to this year of 89.9. Again, very consistent. You'll see this month over month, year over year comparisons. And the reason for that is that we have very tight budget guidelines that you're going to be looking at later today that really reflect what our program is, and it enables us to financially plan according to those guidelines, which equate to how we actually spend our money. So you'll see that very consistently. I wanted to mention to you that we do transfers between objects, and those come to the board for approval. If we have a transfer within an object, we can do it within that object by statute without coming before the board, but we do report it here on this statement. So as you look at subsequent pages in here, the backup, you're going to see there might be some minuses within the object. Those will be transferred within the object when we go to reforecast. So if we can, move on to the grants. Give you some information on grants. So New Canaan is entitled to certain grants from the federal government. The title grants really relate to either professional development, support for children that qualify through their economic status, and Dr. Carenti manages the programs associated with those grants. She develops the budget, it's approved by the state for the federal government, and we administer that. Likewise, Mr. Tesber administers the IDEA grants. And jointly, the new ARPA grants and the ESSER grants associated with COVID are jointly administered by both Mr. Tesber and Dr. Carente. This year, you'll see about $1 million, which is going to be over a 2-year period of grant money coming in from the federal government. And we have developed, I should say Dr. Carente and Mr. Tesber has developed some very good comprehensive programs that will be implemented and are being implemented right now. And those funds will come in as we spend the money. So it's not unusual to see, in this case, you'll see that revenues are less than expenditures at the bottom of the center column. And the reason for that is that we do get reimbursed after we expend the funds. And we'll go into the summer. And the ideal situation to have here is that they balance out to zero, basically. So moving on, and I did include a description of all the grants in here for you to review so that you have an idea of where the grant's coming from. You can Google a lot of these if you want some more in-depth information on each grant. There's a lot online for that. Moving on to the food service program, the last 2 years I mentioned to the board in previous meetings, we have been running deficits. This current year, we are so excited that the program is back. The kids are eating in the cafeteria. We're back where we were prior to COVID financially, and we do feel that we're going to rebound in the program. So we're very excited about that. We do have some expenditures coming up this summer for refrigeration, which will cost us about $120,000, and that will come out of the fund balance. It will not be requested in our capital budget. Moving on to page 11 and 12, you'll see the facilities rentals, donations, and summer school. The facilities rental last year was close to zero based on the fact that we didn't have our buildings open. But donations are strong. They're always strong. You saw tonight the generosity of our PTCs. And so they continue to be strong, and we haven't missed a beat there. And the summer school program, while we used some of the fund balance to offset some of the program this past summer, the fund balance is sufficient to handle those types of drawdowns. And as you can see on page 12, the balance sheet, you'll see the balances that we have in terms of equity in each of these funds. The last exhibit is of the Internal Services Fund, which is the most interesting, I guess you would put, exhibit that we have for tonight. We had a planned drawdown of the fund balance of $4.2 million at the end of last year. We've already incurred close to $3.6 million, and we're into November. So this is a fund that we have to watch very carefully. We do have enough funds in reserve to handle any kind of a shortfall, but any amounts that we dip into the reserve to offset claims for this year, we would need to include in our budget request for next year. So we're really watching this very carefully. Right now, we have another large claimant that's coming in on the books that we were notified about. So this is a number that is going to be closely monitored, as I said, and we will be presenting this report on a monthly basis as we go through the year. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Keating. Questions? Brendan?
Thank you. So is our lunch program actually back to where it was in 2019 or
Yeah,
2018?
as far as
Yeah.
participation and revenue go, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Excellent to hear. That's pretty quick. I would have expected it to take longer.
Yeah, the high school rebounded this year.
Great. And then on the facilities rentals, are we having to say no to certain events relative to what we've been able to do in the past, or no? Or are we kind of back to normal?
We're trying to stay open. I mean, it is a week-by-week situation right now, but we have opened up the books for rentals. So the basketball leagues are coming in now. We have usage by outside arts groups and that sort of thing, but we're hoping to keep them open.
Great,
as
thank
much
you.
as we can.
Yep, and renters understand that if they do use our spaces, they have to abide by the mitigation strategies in place as well.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
All right. I think next we'll move through the second read of the committee charters that we discussed at our last meeting. We have 3 to approve. Let's see. The first is we have a first and second motion at the last meeting, so tonight we'll just be approving. So I'll just ask if there are any additional comments or edits, and if not, we'll just vote. So first up on the Resources Committee Charter. Before you have a clean copy, and then you have the marked up copy that it reflects the edits that we made at the last meeting. So,
We will be transitioning to all electronic documents soon, I promise. I keep threatening that, and I promise you we'll be doing that in the new year.
and all of this will be reformatted, I think, as the Communications Committee actually gets approved and gets going. I think there's a lot of opportunity to organize our documents, both within the internal tool we'll be using and then also on the website to the public. So I look forward to that. Okay, any comments on the Resources Special Committee? Okay, if not, all in favor to approve the BOE Resources Committee Charter as a special committee for a term of 1 year? Okay, I see all hands up. Thank you. Next is the committee charter for the Communications Committee. Any comments? Okay, then all in favor?
Sorry, just a second.
Yep.
I'm not understanding the history of the changes. It looked to me like the changes are in the light gray, right?
Yes.
So there were 2 changes. A whole big section wanted to be added on to section 2, and then part of it was taken out.
Sorry, where are you in the document? Are you up front?
I'm under section 2 entitled Charge.
Committee.
On governance. I just couldn't tell like what.
Oh, we're on communications right now.
Oh, you're on communication. I'm sorry.
Yep,
I was
and then I'll-
okay, sorry.
I will
went-
answer your question and.
That's fine.
Just a
Sorry.
minute.
Communications, I'm good to vote.
Okay. So,
Apologize.
all in favor of the BOE Communications Charter as a special committee for a term of 1 year? Okay, all hands up, thank you. Okay, Penny, let's go back to the Governance Committee. So we have an older version of the bylaws on the website, and I had pulled from the wrong version, so we're going to be updating the website. But this language was just to update, it's updated language that appears in Series 9000 versus what used to be Article 2, Section 6. It's essentially, I think the message is the same, but the language was edited, so it's the latest, it reflects the latest
Okay, thank
bylaw
you.
language. Other questions, comments? Okay. All in favor of the BOE Governance Committee Charter as a special committee for a term of 1 year? All right, I see all hands up, thank you. All right, next is the goals, budget, assumptions, and related, oh, yeah, sure.
Do we have a plan for, like, scheduling the first committee meetings?
Yes, so what we'll do now is we'll work on setting up the first meeting of each of the committees, and then in that meeting, it'll be somewhat organizational. The committee will discuss, we'll review the charter probably in greater detail. Committee will elect a chair, and we'll discuss procedurally how to move forward in developing a schedule and the workload.
Right, so Jacqueline in my office will be helpful with scheduling that first meeting. And then the chair after that will work with Jacqueline for the communication and the scheduling going forward.
And we'll discuss minutes and all of the sort of the details of committees. So, thanks. Good question. All right. And then, do you want to just provide a quick summary of the?
Sure, the budget
Goals,
assumptions
yes.
and related priorities,
Yep.
and I certainly, invite any member of the cabinet to jump in if they want. First of all, I want to say thank you to the board for adjusting the agenda and putting this on just for a first reading tonight with understanding that greater detail and conversation upcoming when we return from the break. But it is something that's important for us because it's kind of the cycle of budgeting and resource management and development. As you know, as a board, we work in this, well, actually, before the summer, in the spring, as an administrative team, we look at our district goals. We make some edits and revisions as suggestions and bring them to the board in the summertime. The board then, over 2 readings, and sometimes it's over 3 meetings or so, edits those goals, discusses them, refines them, and kind of locks them in as our district goals for the year. We then communicate that to administrative teams at the administrative retreat. And generally there are quite a few iterative type goals. So we're doing something and here's our next step in doing that work. Sometimes there's some kind of emerging goals, like our innovation work this year was sort of a new goal that's emerging into the work that we're doing. But they go ahead and they do some of the implementation around that. We then, as we prepare for our budgeting in the future, we look at those goals again and we develop our goals, budget assumptions, and related priorities. And as Dr. Keating just briefly mentioned in her overview of the financials, this then really helps us to set the priorities for how the resources are allocated and spent as we manage that budget and go through the course of the year. So our most important priorities should all be reflected in this document. And it's a way that we make sure that we're always working in alignment with sort of our mission, vision, values, and goals as a district. Some of the language is very precise, others more general, depending upon sort of the initiative or the idea or value or goal that's in consideration there. But all of it is really meant to be a way to make sure that everything we do is in alignment with our beliefs and with what we have set as our goals as a district for us to accomplish. So we use this, we'll be speaking to this. It helps us when we meet with our town bodies as well, so that they say, well, why is this or why is that? We go back to this document, and it helps again to just sort of clarify our thinking and also in our budget management, as we go forward into the new year. So these are revised annually based on changes to the goals and shifting priorities a little bit here and there. For instance, we went through and removed just about all of the COVID-related budget assumptions and priorities for 22-23. With an understanding that, there's one piece still in here about continuing to accelerate the positive things that we've learned and those implementations, but we anticipate, knock on plastic, I guess, but anticipate that 22-23 will be a different experience than what we've had this year. So, we use this to signal forward as well. And I don't know if there's anything anyone would like to add. So we're glad to sort of delve into it at maybe the week when we get back. We can carve out a little bit of time as we are going to be together for some other things. Yeah. And glad to go through and hit any highlights or have any conversation about it that you deem best.
Yeah, and I would just, particularly for the new board members too, just it's helpful to view this in the context of the district goals that were approved the beginning of the school year. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage to have them side by side. Just so you can see how they relate back to where we started. But yeah.
Could we get a black line versus the last year's, just for easier to see kind of what has changed?
Sure.
I don't know if it would be easy to follow or not, but if it's one that would be useful, it might just be a little helpful.
We've deleted a few. We've sort of moved some around, and I was 3/4 of the way done with it before I remembered that I didn't turn on the save changes. So
no worries.
To be honest, but I'll take a look and see if there's a way I can control Z a whole bunch.
Don't stress it. It's not a problem.
Right. What I can do, I can get a copy of the 21-22, and I'll highlight a few areas for you if that's helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay, so comments from the public. Anyone wishing to address the board? Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, thank you, Bob. Sorry. Hang tight for just 1 minute. Motion to approve is the first reading, the 22-23 budget assumptions and related priorities. First, Bob. Second, Phil. All right, thank you. We're all set.
Thank you.
Okay, James.
Just two quick.
You state your name, please.
Oh, James Yao. Just two quick things regarding the start time issue. One is, well, I guess three things. One is, thank you very much for coming up with a scenario which I think is a much more reasonable compromise when compared to the prior scenario. The other thing is, I think we have provided, some of us have provided a fair amount of science and research. So I think we've also offered to help or collaborate in any way we can to support the scientific investigation of which is the better scenario. Although we haven't been kind of approached or responded to in that sense, we're more than happy to provide it to you. Specifically, regarding some of the comments on circadian rhythms, we have a fair amount of research, at least 2 research projects that show that circadian rhythms do not start only at adolescence. As most things in nature, things are gradual. So it's not like 12 o'clock, all of a sudden kids can't sleep. So they say that circadian rhythms start as early as 5 or 7, and it's a gradual process. I know anecdotally, my son cannot sleep till at least 9 or 9:30, and it doesn't matter when he wakes up. So I know that to kind of be the case, but there is research out there. We're happy to provide it. And the other point is, I know that some of this may be driven by, some of this new scenario may be driven by feedback received from high school students specifically. I'd love to kind of see if a survey like that can be kind of extended to both staff members as well as families, parents of elementary school children to get a better picture of what the community really wants. Unless there's one scenario that is stupendously better than the other, and I don't think anybody's claiming that. So I'm hoping that in the future there'll be a survey out. The survey should be a simple, which scenario do you like? And I'm hoping that'll put some resolution to this, and I've been asking for this for a while, I know. Otherwise, happy holidays, everybody, and hope to see you next year.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Other comments? All right. Thank you. Announcements and future business.
Sure. We are on the countdown, 2.5 more days before the holiday break here in the schools. So we have a half day on Thursday, the 23rd. And schools then will be closed for the holiday break until January 3rd of 2022. I had to change that in the initial copy of the agenda because it said 2021. Hard to believe it's 2022 already. So our next Board of Ed meeting will be January 10th, at which point I'll be sharing the superintendent's proposed budget. We'll be meeting before that, as you know. I think we're looking at the 5th to meet with Joe Spurgeon, talk about some insurance information, and et cetera. A lot of the other things that are happening. But I too want to thank the board for a moment of silence on Claudia Monaco's behalf. She was truly a special person, and amongst all of the list of all of the roles that she played, she also was a very proud New Canaan High School alumnus, as you likely know. And she was I'm going to just take privilege here and share a quick story. So, as you know, my father passed away in April of 2020. And I was quarantining with my mother for 2 weeks afterwards because we had been with him in the hospital room prior to his passing. And Claudia reached out and invited me to join her kindergarten class, and virtually, because we were virtual, we had all shut down in March. And so I jumped in from my mother's house where we were quarantining. My mother had been a preschool director for most of her life and career, and she watched in the background as each one of these little kindergartners came with a stuffed animal, talked about who it was, and talked about their favorite animals and who they would be, and it just was an absolute joy to be a part of, and probably gave us the first smile we'd had in a long time. And that's who Claudia was, and we're going to miss her. So thank you for taking that moment, and we all feel very fortunate to have had her in our lives when we did. With that, I wish everyone a very happy holiday, a very joyous new year, and as we say, onward in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to say, Thank you to the community, thank you to the board, thank you especially to the administration and all of the teachers and staff who work within our schools for their continued hard work this year under these challenging circumstances. So we are greatly appreciative, and we wish everyone a well-deserved break over the holidays, and we look forward to reconvening in the new year. With that, motion to adjourn into executive session for the confidential discussion of a potential real estate transaction. First, Erica, second, Dan, all in favor? Okay, thank you. We'll be back for a potential action item after our session.